In our top stories, Tokyo Electric Power Company says it has stopped radioactive water leaking from a concrete pit outside the number 2 reactor at the troubled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant.
A French nuclear safety institute is calling for long-term monitoring of the Pacific Ocean off northeastern Japan following leaks of radioactive material from the nuclear power plant.
And an increasing number of Japanese companies listed on stock exchanges are downgrading their earnings forecasts. Now, the news in detail. Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, says it has stopped radioactive water leaking from a concrete pit outside the number 2 reactor at the troubled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. On Tuesday, the plant operator drilled a hole into a layer of gravel around the pit and poured a hardening agent called liquid glass, or sodium silicate, to stop the leak of highly radioactive water into the sea. TEPCO says the flow was confirmed to have stopped on Wednesday morning and that there has since been no change in the water level in the pit and the nearby turbine building. Workers are looking for more possible cracks through which the water could leak out. Meanwhile, TEPCO is close to finishing the release of about 10,000 tons of wastewater contaminated with low-level radiation into the sea to make room in storage tanks for highly contaminated water. The company is also continuing to spray a synthetic resin solution on the plant's premises to prevent radioactive dust from becoming airborne. Debris and dust contaminated with radioactive material have been scattered across the compound by a series of explosions at the number 1 through number 3 reactors. On Wednesday, the resin solution was sprayed over a 300 square meter area around a pool for spent nuclear fuel.
TEPCO says it will inject nitrogen gas into the containment vessel of one of its reactors on Wednesday to prevent a possible hydrogen explosion. TEPCO said on Wednesday that hydrogen gas appears to be accumulating inside the containment vessel of the number 1 reactor. The utility says damaged fuel rods and water broken down by radiation inside the reactor's containment vessel may be leading to the release of hydrogen gas. TEPCO added that it's also considering the injection of nitrogen into the number 2 and 3 reactors. Nuclear power plants are equipped with a device to inject nitrogen gas into containment vessels, but TEPCO said it plans to use an alternative device this time. A blast ripped off the roof and walls of the number 1 reactor building on March 12th, one day after the massive quake and tsunami hit the plant. Experts believe that accumulated hydrogen gas was behind the blast.
Japanese fishermen are demanding compensation from TEPCO for the damage to fish stocks caused by the company's release of radioactive wastewater into the sea. The head of the National Federation of Fisheries Cooperatives, Ikuhiro Hattori, made the demand in a meeting with TEPCO chairman Tsunehisa Katsumata on Wednesday in Tokyo. Hattori complained that TEPCO did not consult with fishermen before deciding to release contaminated water into the sea from the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant. He demanded the company make every effort to stop the leak of contaminated water and pledge responsibility with the government for compensating fishermen for their losses. Katsumata apologized to fishermen for the trouble TEPCO has caused. Hattori later told reporters he feels nothing but anger and would like to see all nuclear power plants in the country immediately shut down. He said fishermen would no longer cooperate in any way with nuclear power plant operators.
A French nuclear safety institute is calling for long-term monitoring of the Pacific Ocean off northeastern Japan following leaks of radioactive material from the nuclear power plant. The Institute of Radiological Protection and Nuclear Safety has analyzed the impact on the sea of a recent leak of water with high levels of radiation at the number 2 reactor. The computer analysis was based on publicly available data. The analysis showed that as of Monday, water contaminated with radioactive substances had spread to areas near the coast of Fukushima and Miyagi prefectures. It also showed that airborne radioactive substances had mixed with seawater. The research projected that the contaminated water could be spread throughout the Pacific Ocean in 3 months by the Japan current. The French laboratory said some radioactive substances may be diluted by seawater, but others are highly likely to settle on the seabed. It added that cesium-134 can remain in the sea for several years and cesium-137 for about 30 years. The lab warned that fish and seaweed in Pacific coastal areas of Japan could be contaminated by the substances. The official death toll from the March 11th earthquake and tsunami in northeastern Japan has risen to 12,494. 15,107 people are still listed as missing. The National Police Agency said on Wednesday morning the number of dead or missing now exceeds 27,000. About 82% of the bodies recovered have been identified and are being handed over to families. The final death toll could increase as officials in some of the devastated areas have not been able to complete their tally of the missing. Search operations within the 20-kilometer exclusion zone around the troubled Fukushima nuclear power plant are being hampered by radiation. In many regions of Japan, Wednesday, April the 6th, marks the start of the school year. But in the three prefectures of Miyagi, Iwate and Fukushima, devastated by a massive earthquake and tsunami last month, nearly 300 elementary and junior high schools are left without prospects for resuming classes. In today's angle, NHK senior news commentator Nobuo Hayakawa gives his insight on the theme of what will happen to the reopening of schools. So many schools in the three prefectures will not be able to resume classes.
3県全体で6、7校に1校の割合に上るんです。NHK が各地の教育委員会を通じて
Across the three prefectures, 1 out of every 6 or 7 schools are unable to open. NHK surveyed local education boards in the region and found the major reason was that schools are being used as shelters. The next biggest reason was that school buildings have been swept away by tsunami or damaged and cannot be used. The third was that many students are still unaccounted for.
So resuming classes at such schools is not an easy task.
Yes, that's right. Some schools are attempting to resume classes by using school buildings nearby that withstood the disaster, holding joint classes with other schools, or scheduling classes for 2 schools in the same building by separating them into morning and afternoon groups. At the same time, teachers of some schools have died or are missing, while others are living at shelters, making it difficult to resume classes. In addition, the area around the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant has been declared an evacuation zone, and entry into school buildings in the zone has been prohibited. Many schools cannot reopen, even if they want to.
What do schools need to do before they can resume classes?
First, they need to quickly make contact with students and their parents, so the number of students that can attend classes can be ascertained. Based on that, they can determine how many classes they can hold and how many teachers are needed. Education boards have a record of the number of children living at shelters, but it's difficult to figure out the number of children among families who have evacuated independently. Teachers who experienced the 1995 Hanshin earthquake point out that one factor in reopening schools is alleviating the burden on teachers who are helping out at shelters. They say such work should be gradually transferred to municipal organizations so that teachers can focus on maintaining close contact with children. This kind of contact alone is enough to provide a sense of security among children. They also say after the Hanshin earthquake, the cheerful voices of children returning to classes brought a sense of hope for the restoration of disaster-stricken areas. I hope that day will come soon in the devastated regions of northeastern Japan.
That was NHK senior news commentator Nobuo Hayakawa.
You're listening to NHK World Radio Japan in Tokyo. An increasing number of Japanese companies listed on stock exchanges are downgrading their earnings forecasts following the massive earthquake and tsunami last month and subsequent rolling blackouts. Leading food maker Kagome now expects its annual net profits in the term ending in March to fall by 47% from the previous forecast. Major household equipment maker Toto predicts its net profit will drop by 25%, while leading medical equipment maker TEPCO forecasts a fall of 11%. Views on other Japanese firms' earnings for the next one-year period are also grim. Merrill Lynch Japan Securities now forecasts that net profits of the country's leading companies will fall by 27%. Originally, the firm had predicted the company's profits would rise. Barclays Capital also downgraded its forecast, projecting earnings of leading firms would fall by 12%. Japanese firms had been on a recovery track fueled by expansion in business in emerging economies, but things have taken a drastic turn for the worse as the disaster continues to affect many companies.
The Asian Development Bank predicts a robust growth of 7.8% in 2011 for the Asia-Pacific region as a whole. The organization believes the impact of Japan's recent disaster on supply chains will be limited. On Wednesday, the bank announced the outlook for 45 Asia-Pacific economies, excluding Japan and other advanced nations, at a news conference in Hong Kong. The bank says growth in the Asia-Pacific region is likely to continue this year, thanks to rapid expansion of emerging economies like China and India. The bank says last month's earthquake and tsunami have dealt a heavy blow to Japan's consumption and corporate activity. But it says resulting supply disruptions for auto and electronics parts to other Asian countries will have a limited impact on the region's economy as a whole. The bank's chief economist says supply chain interruptions following the disaster will last only about 6 months. He adds that even though the disaster's impact on financial markets is limited at this point, uncertainties remain over the effects of the nuclear crisis and power shortages.
There are still no signs of a solution to the crisis in Libya. Anti-government forces have rejected Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi's proposal to hand over power to one of his sons. Gaddafi's troops and opposition forces backed by NATO-led air support continue to fight in the northeastern city of Brega and Misrata in the west. On Monday, the Gaddafi administration sent Deputy Foreign Minister Abdelati Obeidi to Turkey and Malta. Although details of the negotiations are not known, he reportedly proposed a plan to have Gaddafi's second son, Saif al-Islam, take power and begin the transition toward a democracy. On Tuesday, an opposition spokesperson rejected the idea, saying Gaddafi's sons are no different from their father. The opposition rules out any settlement that would leave Gaddafi or his sons in power. On the same day, an oil tanker entered a port in the opposition-controlled northeast. Experts say that with the backing of Qatar, the opposition plans to export oil and secure funds. They say it is preparing for the collapse of the Gaddafi administration.
Côte d'Ivoire's President Laurent Gbagbo may soon be forced to give up power after opposition forces backed by the United Nations and France launched a major attack to close in on a stronghold in Abidjan. Tuesday's massive pre-dawn military operation has cornered Gbagbo in an underground shelter at his residence with his family and close aides. UN sources say Gbagbo has begun negotiating terms for surrender with the opposition forces. They say Gbagbo wants to have direct talks with the UN officials to decide the terms of his departure. The Ivorian Election Committee declared Alassane Ouattara the winner of last November's presidential race. Gbagbo's refusal to admit defeat has triggered violent clashes between his supporters and Ouattara's forces.
Next, Tokyo markets. On the Tokyo Foreign Exchange Market on Wednesday evening, the yen fell against the U.S. dollar by 0.69 yen from Tuesday evening. At 5 p.m. local time, the dollar was traded at 85.03 to 85.05 yen. The Nikkei average of 225 selected issues dropped on Wednesday afternoon. It was down by 31.18 yen from Tuesday's close to end the day's session at 9,584.37. And that was the news from NHK World Radio Japan in Tokyo. I'm Joseph Queenie.
And I'm Keiko Kitagawa.